Good afternoon, welcome. Thank you for coming. It is an absolutely splendid occasion, and I could not be happier than to be here as part of, well, let me be clear, as an attentive listener to the Paul Bourke Lecture. I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I'd like to issue a special note of welcome to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are with us today, and to express my appreciation for all of the ways in which we continue to be broadly enriched by your guidance and your contributions and your knowledge of this place, this little bend in the river. My name is Heather Zwicker. I am the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences, and it is indeed a great pleasure to welcome you here today. No one has come to hear me belabor an introduction, so I am going to hand over with no further ado to Professor Lorraine Mazerol, known to all for her own amazing intellectual and professional accomplishments in the broad field of criminology, extending through new undergraduate programs, fantastic record of graduate supervision, and a depth of public engagement that sets a standard for us all to aspire to, and our representative on this campus of the ASSA. So Lorraine.
Great, thank you very much, everybody. And so, yes, I'm Lorraine Mazerol. I'm an experimental criminologist, and I'm also a fellow of the Academy of Social Sciences in Australia, which is ASSA for short. So who knows anything about ASSA? No one. Okay, so my job here as the representative of ASSA is just to introduce you to this event and to introduce you to a little bit about what ASSA is all about. So the Academy of Social Sciences Australia was set up in 1971. It's replaced its parent body, the Social Sciences Research Council, which was established in 1942. And the main goal of ASSA is really to engage in public policy debate and to promote excellence in social sciences. So hence the Paul Bourke Lecture, which is a public forum, which is one of the activities of ASSA. I think we've got a couple of fellows here. I know Janine, Mark Weston, Janine Baxter are fellows. Is there any other fellows here tonight? Okay, so Renee Zahnow is the winner of the Paul Bourke Award. The Paul Bourke Award is an early career researcher award of the Academy of Social Sciences Australia. It's a really, really significant award for early career researchers. So the fact that Renee has won this award for 2019 is really very exciting. So, and who is Paul Bourke? So I looked him up. So his name is Paul Francis Bourke. He was born in 1938 and he died in 1999. He was a historian and did his undergraduate degree at the University of Melbourne and received his PhD from the US. And I tried to find where he got his PhD in the US, but I can't find that out. So if anyone can Google it, you'll get a prize if you find out where he got his PhD from. So he also served as Professor of American Studies and later as Pro Vice-Chancellor at Flinders University in South Australia, and he went on to be the Director of the Research School of Social Sciences at the Australian National University. So this award has been set up in honour of Paul Bourke's contributions to the social sciences in Australia. So it's really my enormous pleasure to introduce Dr. Renee Zahnow as the 2019 Paul Bourke Award winner and tonight's speaker. I really have, it's a great honour for me to be able to introduce Renee. I've watched her go from undergraduate student to PhD student to very accomplished early career researcher. She's a lecturer in the School of Social Sciences, and in 4 short years since her graduation, she's published 36 peer-reviewed journal articles, which, if you do the math, is 9, sometimes 10 articles a year, which is really quite amazing. Renee's published in some of our criminology's leading journals. She's published in Criminology, she's published in Crime and Delinquency, Journal of Urban Affairs. I know she works a lot with Jonathan, working across into geography as well. Her research focuses on place-based patterns of crime and victimisation, and she's going to be talking about that tonight. I should also point out that Renee is a very gifted statistician as well as an outstanding field researcher. So oftentimes you think of statisticians sitting in the corner doing all their statistics, but that's not Renee. She does that, but she has also spent enormous amounts of time in the field out there in Fortitude Valley at 4 o'clock in the morning, breath analysing, I think, over 2,000 young people, most of them drunk, in Fortitude Valley at night, working on a very major project on alcohol-fuelled violence in Fortitude Valley. So I think, Renee, you are very unique in terms of both your field work as well as your statistical expertise. And that's going to be on show tonight. So her lecture tonight, Patterns of Crime in Everyday Life, using big data to capture the dynamics of urban social environments. So please join me in welcoming Renee to give the Paul Bourke Lecture tonight.
Thank you so much, both Professor Zwicker and also to Professor Mazarol, for that very lovely and generous introduction. As Lorraine was saying, I'm going to be, if I have power here, let's see if we can get this guy working. There we go. I'm going to be talking to you today about patterns of crime in everyday life and using big data to capture the dynamics of urban and social environments. This guy here, who's ever used Strava? Yes? Okay, so Strava's like map my ride. So when you go out cycling, you can map where you're going. This guy here maps out the streets that he needs to ride on to make pictures before he goes. Now, most of us, we don't plan our life that carefully. Our general routines in life just seem to come about a little bit more casually than that. And, without even much thought, we tend to just sort of go through our daily repetition of activity. We're going to be talking about that a little bit today and thinking about how that then influences the way in which we have opportunities to experience crime events. So first of all, I also just want to thank everyone for being here today to honour Professor Paul Bourke. And Professor Paul Bourke was a very important Australian social scientist. And as Lorraine's already touched on, that's something that's it's really important that we recognise the things that he gave to the social sciences in Australia. One of the big things that I want to concentrate on today, and I want people to be able to take away from this chat, this lecture, is that what we're coming about with at this time with developments in the social sciences is that there is we've got access to new forms of big data, we've got access to smart data, and we've got access to new forms of technology that's really allowing us to capture daily life in motion in ways that we've never been able to before. Now, this is really enabling us to think about capturing, measuring, objectively and empirically, opportunity windows, temporary time periods that slide open during the day when people's schedules, their routines, overlap with other people's schedules or routines and bring them into the same place at the same time. This provides an opportunity for an offence to occur. It also provides an opportunity for a pro-social activity to occur. We need to think about both of those things, because pro-social activities occurring can be really beneficial to prevent crime. So this can also be useful to think about. Now, just before we get any further into this, and before I start talking about the bits that are about theory and those sorts of things, I want everybody to cast their mind back to this morning. Now, for some people, that might seem like a very long time ago. For some people, not so bad. Right, so let's just start thinking about this morning, at least until coffee time. So let's think about when we first left the house. Now, for some people, if I just asked you, you'd probably say, if I said, what did you do this morning? You'd probably say, yep, I went from home to work. But numerous things happened during that journey. And those little things that happened, the parts of that journey, they're the things that provided opportunities for you to experience crime. All right? Now, for some people in this room, they drove to work. Okay, so they're backing out of the driveway, they're stopping, see you later, mum, dropping the kids at school just there. They somehow changed vehicles on the way. Let's pretend that that's not happening. Then you're off for the dreaded car park chaos. All right, we're driving around. Who works at UQ? Right, okay, so if you didn't get here before 8 o'clock, you're actually going to be driving around for an awfully long time. All right, so you're driving around until you find a car park, and then you maybe, if you're lucky, you meet up with your colleague, and you're going to wander up to the office. So there's a number of different things happening during that journey. Other people in the room might have caught the bus into work. So they might have been jumping on the bus, straight into the King George Square, it's busy time, lots of people bumping into me, got to try and all get through the turnstile, touch on and off with our go-card, that person that's never got their go-card out ready, so we're all waiting in line while they try and find it in their bag. And then you have to take the detour to get your favourite coffee, which is quite nice, except that you're waiting in line for quite a while, which is, not good before you get coffee in the morning. And then off to the office. All right, so a number of things happen in both those situations that provides opportunities for you to be involved in crime. And then you repeat those. A lot of those things happen day after day, and they'll happen again tomorrow in much the same way. Now, the thing is, with the kinds of data that we've had up to this point, we have had to ask people about what they do. Now, these normal things that happen every day as part of our routine are largely unconscious, or not unconscious, but subconscious. We do them without really thinking. So when people ask us about our activities, we don't report them. We report where we started and where we end up, but we don't report the things in between. And it's those things in between, those times in between, when opportunity windows open. All right? So that's really important. Now, thinking about crime in this way isn't new. All right? These theories have been around for a long time. The routine activities theory of crime was first spoken about by Cohen and Felsen at the end of the 1970s. Now, they came up with this theory because they wanted to explain the way in which changes in the American lifestyle following World War II could perhaps explain changes in patterns of crime. So they were talking about the way that more women left the household during the day and they were all off at work, so houses were left unoccupied during the day, unguarded, and there was plenty of opportunities for people to break in. People could break in easily and steal anything they wanted. No one was in these household areas. Similar things to that. So what they said was, generally, crime and disorder are opportunistic. People don't really go out of their way to do these things. They just take place as part of everyday legitimate activities. You, me, everyone else, we're all just going about our legitimate activities, our daily routine, and then every now and then the schedules or the routines of people and places will overlap in such a way that an opportunity to commit an offence presents itself that is so attractive that we participate in that. All right, so when offenders and suitable targets overlap and there's no one watching out, there's no capable guardian, and that opportunity is attractive to the offender, and that offender can be anyone, it could be you or me, then that crime can take place. And that's these opportunity windows, okay? All right, so that made sense, all right, you know, that this crime was largely opportunistic. But what it didn't explain is why crime seemed to be concentrated around particular places and at particular times. So crime pattern theory, it explains that crime concentrates at particular locations and at particular times because of the way that the functions of particular facilities attract people and influence the flow of populations at particular times of the day. For example, we know that transport stations generate crime because they attract large flows of population throughout the day. Lots of people are coming and going. So certain types of crimes are generated when there's lots of people. All right, there's plenty of opportunities because lots of people are there. Things like theft from the person, right? Bag snatching. Where's that going to occur? That's going to occur where there's lots of people. So where these places that generate lots of population flow have lots of opportunities for that. Crime attractors, on the other hand, are generally places that maybe don't have lots of people there, but they might have things that are attractive, but they don't have lots of people. So no guardians to watch them and to make sure they don't get perpetrated against. So for example, if I wanted to commit graffiti, I might go to a place where there's no one there, no one watching, no guardians, and I won't be able to have anyone stop me from doing that. And that place where there's no one would be a crime attractor. Now, part of the main underpinning factor with these theories is that people encounter each other in time and space. Yep, so offenders and victims or targets come into contact, they encounter each other, and that provides these opportunities. Unfortunately, up until now, we haven't had any data to really assess whether encounters occur. We ask people what they do, we do surveys on what people think, but we haven't had any real measures on this encounter part. That's been an assumption that's built into these theories, and we've tested these theories widely and we've said, yes, there's a lot of support for them, but this encounter assumption, we haven't really empirically tested until now. And that's what big data and that's what smart data is now enabling us to do. And there are a number of ways that we can do this. So what I'm going to do for you today is I'm going to present a number of layers of ways that we can do this. Ways that we can get at what I think about as being the orchestral piece that is the urban settlement. So I want people to think about this as your routine, my routine, and the routine of the other facilities and features of the urban environment as coming together as a rhythm of flows in and out during the day that certainly isn't a nursery rhyme. This is no simple lullaby. This is a very complex orchestral piece, okay? So we've got buses and trains arriving on their schedule. We've got shops opening at particular times. We've got the school drop-off, it's got its schedule. And then we've got you and me and all the other people in Brisbane operating on their own routine. So this is lots of different instruments coming and going at different times. So we're going to look at some of those layers today and the way that smart data and big data can help us to actually empirically unpack those. So the first thing that we can start to look at, oops, goodness me, what are we doing? We've been jumping ahead. I'm giving you letting you look ahead there. All right, so the first thing that we can do is we can use things like mobile phone traces to start looking at where people actually go. So a lot of the time we ask people about their perception of things, we ask people about their activities and where they go, but we don't actually have objective measures of that. Now, with smart data from mobile phones and mobile phone apps and traces, we're able to measure where people actually go, and this tells us an awful lot. What we find out when we look at people's activity traces, by the way, this is me over a 2-week period, and it shows the absolute boring life that I lead. So, if I wanted to demonstrate routineness any more this is the perfect example. I had 4 main hotspots: work, home, gym, and then mum and dad's house on the weekend. My mum and dad are here, by the way, there they are. So that's mum and dad's house that I visited on the weekends. So that's my life. But what we found by starting to look at these things is that people do conduct a large proportion of their daily activities within very few nodes and paths, and not just me, okay? Now, because we only have few paths that we visit though, and few nodes that we go to, we're highly familiar with these places. This means though that these places we're highly familiar with are the same places where we're likely to experience crime. Now, those experiences might be as a victim, a target, but they might also be as an offender. So we're highly familiar with the places that where our crime experiences occur. Tick. This is what the theories have been telling us. Yes? Great. So the data that we're getting from this smart data is saying, yes, what you were saying so far seems to agree. But then when we start thinking about what we've been asking people about perceptions, we think, what can we get from this data? Well, what we've been asking people is, what do you perceive crime to be like in your neighbourhood? And a lot of the time we compare that to the actual level of crime in the neighbourhood, and we go, you know what, people aren't very good at saying what crime's like in their neighbourhood. Everyone's suggesting that crime's at a different level. No one's agreeing in the neighbourhood. Why is this? Oh, it must be because of all these different reasons. But then when we look at what people are experiencing as their neighbourhood, do you think we should be expecting that they have the same perceptions of crime in their neighbourhood? No. How many people here have walked up every street in their neighbourhood? Gerhard. A couple of people at the front here. I have to admit I've lived in my same neighbourhood for about 5 years, and I definitely haven't traversed all of them. I literally go to the end of the street and turn the same way every time. And that's what routine does to us, okay? But what this means is when we start to think about perceptions of crime, we need to think in a more nuanced manner than previous measures have allowed us. We can't think about suburbs, we can't think about neighbourhoods, and we can't think about comparing people's perceptions, what they tell us, to these neighbourhood levels, because we are going to get a disjuncture, and we're going to because their experiences are personalised. All right? So what we have found when we look at this on a more nuanced level is that people's proximity to crime impacts their perceptions. So how close I live to a recent violent event impacts my perceptions of crime, my perceptions of effectiveness of police, and my fear of crime, or how safe I feel when I'm walking on the streets at night. All right? So because routine awareness spaces make us more or less aware of different parts of the neighbourhood, we do not all think the same about crime in our neighbourhood, and we do not all perceive crime as being the same. So this challenges previous assumptions that everyone living in a neighbourhood will perceive crime to be at a similar level. All right? So basically what we've checked out so far is that crime is largely opportunistic and that individual activities are largely routine. So does this mean that we should be able to predict the propensity for people to be an offender, a target, or a guardian? Should be predictable? Well, not really, because there's a lot more things involved than just that. We need to know about who people are with, when they're in particular places, and what those places are. What I mean by that is what the functionality is, what's happening there. But knowing more about, so knowing more, having more data about people's individual traces, where they go and what they're doing, can help us to understand their chances of having encounters with others and interactions with others, their perceptions of crime, their feelings of safety, and then also their crime risk. Feelings of safety is really important for whether or not they'll be utilising the neighbourhood. It can help to understand, things like engagement in the neighbourhood and even their physical activity. What we can start to do to understand then this on a deeper level is start to overlay it with data from the neighbourhood level, okay? So here, if we want to think, all right, so we knew this about individuals, but when might this individual encounter others? We can overlay this with big data sources, big administrative data sources that tells us about the type of land use that might be occurring at certain places where at times of the day and places where this person is walking. So when this person, this is me, is not in their vehicle or in a building, when this person is walking around or lingering, they're waiting, they're not doing anything, they are at educational facilities or residential areas. They're likely to encounter others in this space, and because it's at a time that is a time when other legitimate activities are taking place, it's likely that these might be pro-social. If this was taking place in the middle of the night, I'd be questioning this person. I mean, except for the fact that it's me, obviously. But this also, by building in the temporality, we also get to make some assumptions about whether these activities might be pro-social or criminal or antisocial, okay? So empirical evidence in the past has been limited by a reliance on surveys and observations. People just don't report the normal mundane things they do every day. We just don't think about them. It's like reporting that you brushed your teeth today. No one does it. So individual theories, those theories of crime have long acknowledged the dynamic and interactional nature of human life, but our new technologies allow us to measure it. It's useful to identify routine activity patterns associated with victimisation and offending, because if we identify those patterns, then we can identify what precedes victimisation and we can try and come up with prevention that blocks the opportunity from occurring in the first place. So these are all really beneficial, but the biggest benefits come when we start to aggregate traces and we start to aggregate these individual routines with routines of places. Now, place-based routines are complex. Place routines are complex because places don't exist on their own. Places exist inside spaces. So places exist, each one of these green parcels is a place, and as you can see, they're nested next door to other places and then within a bigger space. Now, the problem is that some places look like this. This is all residential blocks, all these green ones. So this is just lots of houses. This is probably like where many people live. This over here, this is actually South Bank area. So over here what you see is we've got shops and we've got cafes and we've got bars, we've got recreational areas, we've got a few unit buildings, we've got lots of different stuff happening. So I might be a low-key cafe, but I've got a rowdy bar next door. So that influences the capacity for crime to occur at that cafe. Versus if I'm a little cafe that's located here next to all these other just houses, I'm less likely to have crime occurring there. All right, so when we start to think about places and their routines and what that means about crime there, we need to think about the fact that they're nested within spaces and that they have routines. You know, they're open and closed at different times, and they're going to be attracting legitimate activity at particular times, and then be opportunities for illegitimate activity at other times. Up until this point, we've thought about categorising places based on their functions. So we think about bus stops, we think about shops, we think about schools. We've also then thought about saying, okay, let's say all bus stops are crime generators. Because a lot of traffic, population flow comes through, we're going to say they generate crime. When we start to look at the data that big data and smart data provides for us, we see that these assumptions are perhaps not necessarily true. What we see is that there's far more variability within facilities than we've previously thought about. So what we see here is that it may not be accurate to be classifying facilities as either crime generators or crime attractors. Rather, facilities have got routines just like individuals. So we need to be thinking about the routines at places in a far more nuanced way. What we've seen here, for example, is that when we looked at property damage at commercial properties, we saw that there were 4 distinct types of temporal patterns of when property damage occurred at these places. What these patterns suggest is that there is no single, there's no pattern that suggests that places act as a generator at all times or an attractor at all times. It suggests that their activity and the way that they influence crime in an area fluctuates across the day. All right, and we need to be able to identify different patterns and different sequences throughout the day period. All right, so that's really important. So we've talked a little bit about individual patterns, and we've talked a little bit about the day in the life of a facility or a place. So now we can think about bringing those things together. So aggregating those things is where we get the biggest bang for our buck and the biggest benefits. So this here is a good example. Here is a study that we've just done where we're looking at the way in which the flow of people at Brisbane bus stops using smart card data from your Go card influences the patterns of crime there, whilst also thinking about the other facilities that are around those bus stops. So what we're doing is we're taking smart card data and we're seeing how many people are tapping on and off at different stops. And we thought we're going to look at theft from the person, how many people are getting something stolen from them. We're also going to look at property damage, because these two things we would expect, A, when there's higher passengers, based on routine activity theory. All right, so based on routine activity theory, that theory we went over at the beginning, we'd expect where there's higher passengers that theft would be higher. There's more opportunities, the targets are higher. But we would expect where there are higher passengers, we would have lower property damage. Because property damage, the damage to the bus stop or to property nearby, doesn't require that a victim, a person as the victim be present. That means the people who come by will be guardians, all right? So we wanted to check out the theory utilising this smart and big data. So we had the Go card data, we had the crime data, and we looked at the way, and we looked at this. what we found was that at bus stops in Brisbane, passengers tend to represent targets, but not informal guardians. So we found support for this guy. Higher passengers meant higher theft at bus stops, but not the second hypothesis, okay? Now, this could be because we all think that bus stops should be looked after by the Brisbane City Council. So passengers think it's not my responsibility to do anything. As a guardian, this is something that the council should be looking after. And that might be the case in terms of property damage at Brisbane City Council bus stops. But what we also found that was really interesting is that factors nested within multiple spatial scales were really important. So things like multi-storey car parks being located nearby were important indicators of the risk of crime occurring at bus stops. Shopping complexes located nearby, and when I say nearby, I mean within 400 metres or within 400 metres, which is walking distance, all right? So when we think about the people that might be perpetrating particular offences, so property damage, having a shopping centre located nearby or a school located nearby was important. These are important predictors. Why might that be? Who's going to be people who are likely to be damaging property at a bus stop? Young people just doing the naughty. They're just playing up in the afternoon, wasting a bit of time together. They're not people who are serious criminals who are set out, generally speaking, who are set out to do anything particularly deviant, okay, particularly violent, all right? So the routine activities then in and around bus stop locales are related to crime patterns at those places. So this is confirming the idea that the daily routines and activities are really important for predicting where and when crime occurs. So basically, what big data and smart data provide are objective assessments of some of these theoretical assumptions about sliding opportunity windows. And that's what I want people to think about it as. Who's seen Sliding Doors? Gwyneth Paltrow? Yeah, some people here might be too young, some people in the front row. But people who have seen Gwyneth Paltrow in Sliding Doors, you get this idea of when circumstances come about that provide these temporary windows of opportunity. And that's what I want people to think about these as being. All right, so where these situations occur, these chance temporary opportunity windows. But what the data are starting to do is challenge some of the assumptions of previous literature. And they are things like, we did assume that there was homogeneity across neighbourhoods about perceptions of crime. Well, that's something that we can start to really challenge because clearly our experiences of neighbourhoods are very different. So we shouldn't expect that people's perceptions of crime in the neighbourhood are the same. The second one is that we have this assumption that chance encounters and interactions with neighbours occur on residential streets all the time. You know, we just have these incidental interactions with our neighbours. Well, looking at our traces, this doesn't really seem to be the case. People aren't having incidental interactions on residential streets all the time because they're not walking around on residential streets all the time, all right? The third one is that we have an assumption that there is a homogeneity in crime patterns across facilities of the same types, like all bus stops are the same. Well, the data is clearly not showing that, all right? The other thing I want us to really think about is that at the crux of all our theories, and this isn't just about crime, this is also our sociology theories, is really this idea about social norms being built around observing others in space, all right? Encounters with others, seeing what others do. And then there are bonds and feelings of attachment, and that's built through interactions in spaces. So these are different than encounters. So how might we use the data that we're getting now to differentiate between these two things? And that's one of the things I think that we need to look a little bit more deeply at, to think about the spaces in the urban environment where we might think encounters are happening versus interactions are happening. So the types of spaces that encourage this pro-social engagement or interaction with others. So where do we go from here? Well, we can use this data to, first of all, as I said, identify this encounter to interaction continuum. So differentiate between the co-presence of people who encounter each other in passing versus some sort of interaction that involves a conscious awareness and a passing of understanding between two people, where we pass some sort of idea about this is acceptable behaviour here, this is how we should behave in this environment. We can also start to use this sort of data to think about preventing crime and about closing these opportunity windows. Now, this could be through utilising situational crime prevention and crime prevention through environmental design. These are about changing the urban environment in ways that make it safer for people. So this is doing things like adding lights, putting gates up. It's very basic ways of changing the urban environment to make it safe for people so we personally don't have to bear the price necessarily of changing the environment. It's also, though, about addressing normative behaviours through perhaps getting a place manager in some of these spaces to set norms, and also to encourage interaction, to encourage the removal of the earbuds every now and then, so people actually interact. I think I just see the white earbuds in so often when I'm in public spaces, and I think if we can find some way of encouraging those to come out in some places, that could be really beneficial. There's some really interesting crime prevention work that was going on where they were trialling at train stations and at parks to include study space, to try and encourage people to utilise these spaces, or what I would like to say linger, plug in. So they had desks with study lights, and they had the plug-in for your laptop, and they had internet and all of that sort of thing, so that they wanted people to be there studying and using these spaces so that they were guardians so there was pro-social activity occurring. We can also use this data to respond. So how do we do risk, when victimisation does occur, how do we utilise risk assessment to try and work out the activities that preceded that victimisation and then block those or change those activities so they don't occur again. And that's really important, and we can utilise these kind of techniques to come up with targeted crime prevention advice. So I guess what I want to leave people with tonight is a couple of things. Number one is just to start to consider the way that all of the theories that we sort of think about in sociology and criminology link together at this macro, micro and individual level, and how that then has to start thinking about taking on, also considering continuity and sequencing, so temporality. But beyond that, I really just want people to just really get curious about their own routines. I just want people to be like me, and me not be the only person that goes, why do I always turn right at the end of my street and not left? And I challenge everybody to tomorrow, when you leave your house, try and do something different in your routine and think about the different opportunities that opens or blocks in your daily pattern or your daily routine. So I thank everyone for being here tonight. And I'm going to pass over to Lorraine now. She's going to man the questions, I think. Or am I going to do that? I'm happy to man the questions. So I'd just like to thank everyone for listening to that and ask if anyone's got questions.
Well, this really comes down to the dump. So if you were designing a bus stop or any public space, so you'd want to design it to encourage pro-social interactions and discourage crime. So what sort of factors would you, I mean, obviously you might not have it, really dark at night, for example. So what sort of factors would you do to create that positive environment?
So there's just a question here. I'm just going to repeat the questions for the video. There's just a question here about the sorts of design factors that actually facilitate pro-social and help to prevent crime and antisocial behaviour in public spaces. So lighting's definitely one of them. So lighting really helps to ensure safety. But the good thing about lighting as well is that it makes people feel safer. So it makes more people use space, and when there's more people using a space, that increases guardianship and makes that space safer. The other things, as I said, is to increase the reason why other people might be there. So to utilise to increase functionality of that space and to try and to increase reasons why people might be there. So multi-use. Multi-use facilities are always useful because it increases the use of that area for pro-social reasons at different times. So, increasing people there studying when there would usually be nobody there when there's no trains arriving, that sort of thing. So there's people there watching a space, all right? But the things with SEPTED is we know that things like open visibility, so ensuring that there's no small areas where people can hide behind. So when we think about the basics, when we think about things that increase the chances of a perpetrator being caught or being seen, we reduce the rewards that they can get. These are the things that are going to facilitate prevention at a particular space. What's very important as well, though, is that spaces are designed and an assessment is done that is specific to that location.
So when we are talking about spaces, whether they're crime attractors or the other way around, is there a bit of paradox in there? Because we are saying we want more people because there is safety in numbers, but as we can see, there is also increasing crime sometimes.
There is. So this is the people paradox, okay? So there was a question here about, is there a paradox in there if you're saying that when we increase crime, that increases victims, but then you're saying when we increase crime, when we increase people, that increases victims, but then when we increase people, that also increases guardians. Yes, this is the people paradox with the routine activities and with these opportunity theories. The thing about this is the latest research and some research that we've been doing demonstrates that this is very crime specific. So when we think about people-related crimes where the victim or the target is a person versus when we think about property-based offences, we might have to think about these relationships in different ways. The other thing is there may be a tipping point or a threshold where the number of people gets to a point where there is the best level for guardianship, and then there becomes so many that we can't possibly know who everyone is. So then it just becomes a crowd. So up until a particular level, it might be okay. So this level, yeah, that's okay. I'd probably know if you were going to snatch something off someone else, I'd probably be aware of it would look strange if someone from over here came and started taking something from your bag, all right? But if we had this 3 times this many people, it would start getting difficult for me to see that, all right, that someone else was in there at your bag. Okay, so there might be a tipping point, a threshold. Does that make sense? At the back here?
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. It's fascinating. Are you happy to tell us about the methods of gathering this data? How easy is it to go and get go-kart data? Is that really available? Or mobile phone tracking data?
Yep. Yep. So the go-kart data is collected by the Queensland Brisbane City Council's transport provider, TransLink. And there are a number of ways that you can go about getting that. But, you know, that's all done with assistance from them. And, you know, so we have agreements from them and all of that sort of thing. So you can go about getting it, but you have to you know, go through certain agreements with that provider. But that's not too bad. Getting people's mobile phone traces is just really bloody hard. Honestly, it's just really hard to convince people to get an app on their phone and then be followed for a long time. And yet, all of us are doing it all the time. And then you ask someone to actually do it for research and they're like, oh no, that might use up my battery, I might not be able to text my friends. Like, we literally did drops in all of the letterboxes in all of St Lucia, and guess how many people said, yes, please sign me up? Like 7 from the letterbox dropsers. Like, there was no one. Like, no one is just saying, please sign me up, I will track myself in that way. I think that this is getting better. The problem with Wanda, so Wanda was a specific app that we had built for this purpose. The thing is, we wanted it to be tracking people's movements at a very finite level. And I mean finite as in both spatially and temporally. So what many people don't probably realise is Google and all of those things that track where you're going is not very accurate. It's not very accurate spatially, and it's not very accurate temporally. It might be lagged by a while, and it might be beeping you off spatially off something that's quite a far way away. In order to get that precision, you actually do have to like smash someone's battery, because you have to be getting that mobile checking in a lot. So that actually does use up quite a bit of battery. So you do have to get the person to be really keen, and then you've got to have so ethically, you also have to have people giving their permission to upload their traces each day. So you can't just say, oh, you want to be part of this research, once you get the app on, I'm just going to track you. You know, ethically, we need to still get people's consent all the time, that they're still consenting. And that's important. The other thing is, we need to ensure that we don't put where people live exactly on these sorts of things. So we need to monitor all of that stuff. So that's actually quite tricky. Anyone else?
You didn't mention CCTV cameras. Do they act like a guardian?
Yes. So CCTV cameras can act like a guardian because they give the perception that there's somebody watching. Do CCTV cameras actually provide guardianship, as in will someone be there to act on it? Unlikely. Because most CCTV cameras aren't monitored in real time. Even when they are, it's unlikely that someone's going to get there in time to do anything. But they do make people feel safer, and they do deter crime very successfully because they make offenders think that someone's watching, but most importantly, they help with solving a crime after it's occurred. So they make it easier to see and identify who has committed the offence. As long as there's signs and stuff up as well that says, you know, there is CCTV here. Any other questions? Or are we all hanging out for something to eat and drink? I don't blame you if you are. All right, well, we might close it there then. I'd just like to, once again, really thank everyone for being here and enjoy
Right, and I'm going to do
food and snacks.
All right, Renee.
Oh.
Thank you. So I think that Renee's put a huge amount of effort into this. There's a lot of data and analysis that sits in behind what she's presented tonight, and I think that you've done a really amazing job, Renee, of delivering the Paul Bourke Lecture to a generalist and some specialist criminologists to a generalist audience. So thank you very much, Renee, and congratulations from all of us in the School of Social Science, in the Institute of Social Sciences, and from the Academy of Social Sciences Australia. So congratulations.
Oh, thanks, Diane. I should just say as well, sorry, my co-author to most of this stuff is sitting in the room, Jonathan. So massive thanks to John, and also Anthony was co-author on some of it as well. So I'm so sorry, I should have mentioned them earlier.